Hello, 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 ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for hitting that play button for another episode of the Heady Coleman podcast, where I'm on a mission to encourage a million teachers weekly. And so I'm so thankful that you are joining me today. One of the ways that I love to encourage teachers is by having conversations with teachers and people who support teachers in education. And so I'm so grateful today to have Vernon Wright on the podcast with me today. He's a speaker, an author, a consultant, a leader, and an educator. He has over 18 years of experience working in large urban school districts and has previously served in the roles of teacher, teacher leader, campus leadership team member, and district level leadership, ladies and gentlemen. There's so much more about Vernon that I definitely can share, but I want to see how much of this we can get out through this conversation. But Vernon, how are you doing today, man?
Well, I will tell you this. First of all, I learned from one of my mentors, the great Tom C. Murray. I've learned from the great Tom Murray that we always start out with gratitude. So I want to go ahead and say this, whether you are listening to this in the car, whether you're listening to this at work, whether you're at the gym, wherever you're at and you're listening to this, I just want to go ahead and start out by saying thank you. Because you know what the reality is this, and we'll kind of get into some different things about how we are really hardwired as human beings. The reality is you could be anywhere doing anything, but you chose to, as this great gentleman that I'm here with on this podcast said, you chose to hit play. And we certainly thank you for doing that. And I will say this too, real quick, high tech, low tech, or anywhere in between. I highly encourage you to get something to take notes with, because I have a feeling that being in the space, the thought space with Mr. Coleman here, it is going to be, as a friend of mine would say, live at 5. All right, folks, so let's get ready. My honor to be here with you, sir.
Thank you, Vernon. Thank you. Thank you. Vernon, I love to kind of go back and kind of get as much information starting out with somebody as I can. So now, when you're getting ready to graduate high school,
yes, sir.
What were you thinking you would be at today? Like when you were getting ready to leave high school and you thought today, what would you have thought you were going to be at?
Yeah, a great question, and it's one that I get asked from time to time. One of the things, and kind of giving a shout out to my undergraduate alma mater. My graduate alma mater is different. We can get to that here in a second or two, but my undergraduate alma mater is Texas Wesleyan University. And I am honored all of these many years later to serve on their Alumni Association Board of Directors as the Vice President. And when I share with people that are interested in going to that institution, I tell them that my freshman year, I was a chemistry major. And so with the things that I had in my mind at that time, I was going to go on to be a researcher and maybe go ahead and do some instruction at the collegiate level. And so that's kind of what I had in my mind. But I will tell you, and of course, I don't want to get too ahead of myself. How many of you know out there that are listening to this right now that sometimes you meet a special person in your life and it changes everything that you thought you had planned? And I met a great professor back then, great man. He unfortunately passed away some time ago, but he changed my life. And I tell people that after we had a test in that class, I thought I had done horribly wrong. I thought I'd done horribly bad. And some of my classmates had. And he was telling us our grades. And so when he got around to me, I was like, well, let me brace myself because this is going to be a tough one, right? And, maybe like a 50 or 40 or something crazy. And he looked at me and he said, well, your grade's like a 93. And I was like, excuse me, sir. Excuse me, this must be a typo.
Yeah.
And he changed my life. And so he encouraged me to do a lot of things that great professors and mentors do. And when you have folks like that are in your space, they help to elevate you and make you better. And so I just want to go ahead and just in memoriam to him, say thank you to the family of Lewis Raymond McLean III, or he just used to go by the name Mac. So shout out to his family and to all of my Texas Wesleyan family as well at the undergrad level.
Now, are you from Texas?
Yes, sir. Born and bred. As some of the songs say, I'm from Texas. That's me. All right, folks. Now, it's
Now,
funny that you asked that because you know what I was going to do and what And those that follow me on social media, if you don't follow me on social media, we can talk about this a little bit later, but I'm the right leader on all social media. So, Twitter, I guess it's X now, Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook. Just search the right leader all together, and it's right with a W. And typically, those that follow me on social media know that when I show up somewhere, I show up in a hat. And I was going to
Yes,
do
you
that
do.
today. And I was going to do that today. And I was like, well, I'm not necessarily sure what format you got going. So the hat is in the background, readily accessible if needed.
Well, I'm from Oklahoma, and so
Okay.
I'm right
Boomer
here in
Sooner.
Oklahoma. Yeah, Boomer Sooner, and so it's always good to be able to kind of poke back and forth with people who are from Texas. There's that love hate relationship with
Yes,
Texas and
sir. I'm
Oklahoma.
waving at you from across the Red River.
Okay, okay, yeah, yeah, yeah. So that's good. So you end up going to Texas Wesleyan.
Hmm.
You graduate out of there. When you get
Yes,
ready to
sir.
graduate, um, now you've gotten your master's and all that. Did you get that immediately after undergrad, or were there some things you went and had some life experience and then decided to get
Yeah.
that?
Yeah. Actually, it's a great question. And it's one that I'm asked often. And what I share with folks is that I did not go ahead and immediately get my master's. Looking back on it, if I had something to change, or if I could change or do that experience over again, I probably would do that. But I got out into the professional world, the business world, and had a variety of different experiences. My degree that I graduated with was in economics and finance. And so I said, well, you know what? I think this is the direction I want to go. That professor, Mac McLean, was a very esteemed economics professor and finance as well. And so after that experience with him, I changed everything over to go in that direction. So I got out into the business world and, I had a lot of great experiences. And one of the things that was very pivotal for me was when I reached a juncture in my career. And what I've often shared with people is that to go to the next level in my career, those that were there had shared with me, they said, Vernon, to go to the next level where we think you could go, you need to get an MBA. And I wasn't just really jazzed about getting an MBA at the time. And I worked with some guys. I was really the only person within our group that did not have an MBA. And so, or was not, either did not have an MBA or was not already enrolled in a graduate MBA program. And so I was sitting there thinking, well, this is not really what I'm really excited about. And I'd had a few other people at the same time mention to me, they said, you ought to go into corporate training. You ought to be a corporate trainer because you know how to explain things to people and how to teach people different things. And so, how many of you know, if you've been in a space like that in a corporate setting, that corporate trainer jobs do not have a lot of attrition, folks? People typically get in those and they just stay. And so that was kind of the case where this company was that I was at. That's kind of where they were in that space and time. And someone mentioned to me, they said, you should check out teaching because you have great skills to be a teacher, collegiate instructor. You have those. And I said, well, you know what? Hey, let me try it out. Let's just see what happens. Right. And got accepted. And at the time, it's this very, very, very small city that no one has heard of called Dallas, Texas. Just being a little facetious there, checking to see if everyone is listening. Of course, everything in Dallas is huge. And so, those that are education professionals, you know that we have this thing called alternative certification where you're a job changer. And so, I was a job changer. And so, you basically went through what we would call this 3 month boot camp. And everything in Dallas is huge. Forget about Texas. Everything in Dallas is even bigger. And so, that group of us, there were 230 of us total,
Oh wow.
and it was huge. Yes. And great, great, great memories. I still stay in touch with some of those folks that I went through those experiences with. Several of us, all of us, obviously, have gone on to greater levels of impact within our profession and just kind of the sphere of what we're doing, of course, including this podcast episode here. I'm so very grateful to you all for being with us. And it's just something I'm immensely grateful for. And then the master's degree came a little bit later. So we can talk about that here a little bit later if you wish to.
Got it. So you go and get your certification to begin to teach.
Hmm.
Then
Hmm.
you're going to teaching for a little while. What
Yes.
grades? What grades? What school? What did that look like for you?
Yeah. So great questions. So here's what I share with people. Now, of course, when you're dealing with Dallas at the time, it's a little bit different now, but Dallas at the time had about 150,000 students and
Wow.
about roughly 210 ish schools. It's a little different now. That was many, many moons ago. But even back then, it was huge. I mean, it was very, very, very huge. And so all of my friends that I was going through this program with, all of them were getting their assignments, and all of their assignments were elementary school. And I was like, oh my goodness, well, I'll get elementary school too. Well, how many of you know that sometimes the turnout or the outcome's a little different than maybe you expected? But it all worked out in my favor. Actually, it was an absolute blessing. And so I remember it. We all got our envelopes with these assignments. So everybody's opening them up. I got this elementary school. I got that elementary school. And I opened mine up, and it was a high school. And I was like, okay, did I upset someone? Is there something that happened I wasn't aware of? And those that are from Dallas, when I get ready to mention this part of Dallas, you know that certainly it is not for the faint of heart, and that is Oak Cliff.
Oak
And
Cliff.
Oak Cliff, yes, indeed. So that's where I started my career. The school is still there. And, I want to say this great people. There are a lot of great people doing great work. And always say to people, really think about what it takes to change somebody's life. And education is a tool that we use for that.
How long did you stay at Oak Cliff?
Yeah. So great question,
What
too.
let me
Yeah.
ask you two questions
Hmm.
in that.
Sure.
How long were you at Oak Cliff, and then what were some of your takeaways that made you maybe even fall in love with the work even more?
Yes, absolutely. So I stayed in Oak Cliff for about 8 years, seven,
Wow.
8 years.
Okay.
And yeah, I mean, as they would say, I'm not new to this, I'm true to this.
Yeah.
And so it was really something to me that I saw for those that maybe are people of faith. I really started to see it as ministry and my way to go ahead and connect with people and to change lives. And when I started to see it that way, I started to understand that, you know, the best way for us to go ahead and change people's lives is through connecting with them, talking with them, understanding their backgrounds, understanding their life stories, understanding the challenges and the things that they've been through. And so, one of the things, and I'll kind of share this as a pro tip for those that are out there, those that are loyal followers of mine, you know that when I get on a podcast, I throw out some pro tips from time to time as they come up. So, here's a pro tip. I remember going back to alternative certification days. We had our head instructor. I kind of tease and I say she was like our head drill instructor, our head boot camp instructor, senior boot camp instructor. But those that may have watched the old sitcoms from back in the day in the 70s, you may remember the sitcom named Good Times with
Oh
J.J.
yeah.
Walker. Yes. And so she was the twin of Florida Evans. So if you all know Florida Evans or remember her from being on that show, the character, that was her. And she told us one day, she said, you may not necessarily keep up to date with everything the kids are what's going on with kids and just pop culture. She said, but pay attention to what they watch on TV and pay attention to the music they listen to. Some of the best advice I've ever encountered in my life. And so as I started to go through those different years in Oak Cliff, one of the things I started to see was that a lot of my students were gamers. And I'm a gamer as well. A lot of people don't know that. People that are close to me know that. So I'm a gamer as well. So if you're out there on Xbox, let's go and connect on Xbox Live sometime. And so what I started asking kids was this. And if you're ready to go ahead and write down, great job. If you're not, you're driving or operating heavy machinery or equipment, please do not stop. Continue doing that. Just come back to this later on. But the question I often asked students over those years, as I learned that a lot of them were gamers, was simply this: if we went to your house right now and we turned on your console, what game would come up as the last game that you played, or what would be the last 3 or 4 games that you've been playing? And every time I had students say, "You know what, Mr. Wright, I didn't even know that you were a gamer. Do you know about Madden? Do you know about NBA 2K?" And I'm like, "Do I know?
Let's get
Do I
on.
know? Don't make me go ahead and give you some lessons outside of the classroom on how to do this video gaming, right?" So that was really really cool. But that really helped me to understand that, you know what, and of course I'm going to drop another pro tip. And this is something that a lot of people we talk about in the profession, but it's something that we need to talk about more. Excuse me. And so I simply say this: 3 words: Maslow's before Bloom's. Maslow's before Bloom's. And of course, if you've been in the business for any amount of time, you know that that's something that we often say. But I don't necessarily know that we take time every single day at whatever level we're at in the business, whatever it is we're doing, whether we're on the speaker circuit, whether we're a consultant, whether we're an author, whatever it is that we're doing. I don't know that we really take time to ask ourselves, am I making authentic connections? Am I making authentic connections with students? Of course, obviously, in an appropriate, dignified manner that elevates learning. Am I making appropriate connections and authentic connections with those that I work with my colleagues? So, in other words, as we talked about um, before we hit record, and it's one of the things that, I'm very, very much so ardent about and very passionate about as well. And that is simply this: when I've been able to have had the great honor to be in conversation or in dialogue with someone, do they leave that dialogue saying to themselves, that time was great because I left that as a better person as a result of that dialogue with Vernon? Or, in other words, in short, succinctly, Vernon helped me to be better. And so I think about that often because obviously we're all busy as things are happening in this day and time in our world, and time is never stopping. Time is always going. And so I don't like to waste time, and I don't like for people to waste my time. And so I'm always thinking about, have I made someone else's life better? And I will say this here real quick, and we kind of go back to some of the things that you had asked. I feel really compelled to say this for whomever it is that this is for. Okay. And it simply is this: all it takes is one idea to change your life forever. Just one idea. And this podcast may be that idea for you. And we may think, oh, okay, well, there's just a whatever kind of idea. And then that idea be the very thing that is the genesis of your breakthrough. And so I shared with Tim Cavey on his podcast, Teachers on Fire, one of the first podcasts that I appeared on back in 2019. And I shared with him, I said, whatever it is that we call regular or normal, that's someone else's breakthrough. And so I was always and often want to encourage people to look for that one idea. Because I'm telling you, folks, all it takes is just one idea.
So true. So true. That's the reason I always tell people I can come up with a lot of ideas, which is good because I just never know which one of those ones is going to be the one. So
Yes,
I'm
sir.
like, yeah. I tell my team all the time, if you come up with an idea, let's try because we just never know.
Right.
Let's put a time frame on it and let's see what happens out of that. That's so good. Like I kind of know Oak Cliff because I live in Oklahoma. I know
Okay.
that yes, it could be an area that people can shy away from if that's the best way to kind of say it. Uh, and I love that you talk about making authentic connections. I have a chapter in the book called Hallway Leadership, and
Yes,
really
sir.
that's what hallway leadership is about. It's like how do we make these authentic connections, and a lot of that is in the hallway, like where kids have their shoulders down. But not only that,
Yes,
principals
sir.
and teachers, that
Yes,
interaction
sir.
there. And so I love that. And do you have? Because thinking about this, and you can tell me like just I just love your thoughts on this. How do you make authentic connections? I love how you said that talking to the students about their favorite TV shows or music or games or social
Hmm.
media. And I love how you asked them what was the last three games or whatever the case may be that they or the last game that they played or whatever.
Yes.
In that, because I think what I'm hearing you saying is like through those things that they have that they find joy in and you
Yes,
being
sir.
able to ask questions about those things shows that you are someone who is interested in them beyond the school setting. Is that what I'm hearing you saying?
Absolutely. And so I had a leader share with me many, many years ago. She's long since retired, phenomenal leader. And she basically said, in essence, she said, Mr. Wright, we give time to the things that we truly value. And so this was many, many, many years before I got into graduate work. But I thought about that and I was like, wow, that makes a lot of sense about what things we value and how to determine what that is, right? And so here's another little pro tip that I'll share with people. If you're trying to gain some clarity or granularity on what you believe that you value, I'll tell you to look at two things. All right, folks? Two things. Again, high tech, low tech. Be ready to take notes. The right pro tips are in effect. Two things. Number one, your bank statement, and number two, your calendar. Okay? Those are two things for you to look at, and that will show you where you place your priorities in your life on a consistent basis. And I thought and I realized that, you know what, Vernon? My master's degree is not in curriculum and instruction, CNI. Quick shout out, of course, as well to the American College of Education. Great folks over there. My master's is in leadership. And I realized that as wonderful and as great as curriculum and instruction is, we have to be engaged as human beings to be part of that. So, fast forward to working on my master's thesis at the American College of Education, ace.edu, in case anyone's wondering. Great people over there. I came across this book called Drive, Drive, by Daniel Pink. Those that are in the space that follow a lot of his writings and a lot of his work around the world and nearly the science and art of leadership and business will know that he often talks about this thing called intrinsic motivation. And I needed to connect with what intrinsic motivation was for me, and then I needed to also connect with what intrinsic motivation was for those that I was around at the time. And one of the things that Daniel Pink talked about, and this is something for your listeners to think about, right? And so grateful again for you all to be here on this podcast with us because you could be anywhere. And we thank you for spending your time with us. We definitely want to deliver some value for you and your time. And he asked the question: have you ever worked on a project where you got up early in the morning, you stayed up late at night? Sometimes you almost went on maybe 3 or 4 hours of sleep, but you felt so compelled to work on this project and to make progress on this project, and you weren't getting paid for it. And I thought, well, yeah, there have been some things like that that I've done. And he asked this question, which is a rhetorical one, and many of you know that when you ask a rhetorical question, um, it's so powerful. Of course, obviously, which is why it's a rhetorical question. You don't want anyone to answer; you just want them to reflect on it. And he asked the question, why would you put so much work into something that you're not getting compensated for? And it really caused me to think about and to really reflect on those things that are so important to us. They're so important to us and so meaningful to us. We'll do them without any compensation. Not only will we do them without any compensation, we will go above and beyond to accomplish, to finish, to make significant progress on, to reach whatever the goal is that we feel is important for whatever this project is. So then that leads me to another pro tip, and this is something that I have used over the years. For those that have listened to me on previous podcasts or have seen me speak in person, you know that I have what I call the big three questions. The big three questions, folks. So, of course, I'm not going to give you all three right now on this episode, but I am going to give you one of the three. And so I'll give you a little bit of context before I get into that. One of the things that's been so interesting in asking these questions is I've asked these questions to everyone I've come into contact with. I've asked them of educators, of leaders, of students, support personnel, those that work in the front office, those that are food servers, transportation. Anyone I've come into contact with over the years, I've asked them these three questions. So the number one question is this. This is a little pro tip for you. And this is professionally or personally when you ask people this question. What are you working on right now that you're absolutely passionate about? What are you working on right now, this second, that you are absolutely passionate about? And I will tell you that many years ago, when I first started asking people this question, I had a lady, very, very nice lady, stop me and she said, Mr. Wright, um, I'm kind of a little leery about this. And I said, well, why so? And then she asked me, she said, is this a trick question? And I was like, no, it's not a trick question. But why would you ask that? And she said to me, she said, I asked that because I've never had anyone stop and ask me that question in my life. And I said, well, I'm just asking that question because I want to know what you're about and what is meaningful to you. Because if I know what you're about and what's meaningful to you, that helps me to connect with you as a human being. Like, all of the other really fancy stuff and alphabet soup after people's names and all that other stuff aside, at the end of the day, how can we be involved in this thing called education and we not make authentic connections with people? How else does education happen?
Yeah.
Something to think about.
Yeah. No, that's good. I love that. I love that. Now, thinking about you being in leadership, going to get your master's, which it seems as though you were 8 years at Oak Cliff, right?
Yes, sir.
So,
Yes,
so
sir.
there was a time gap out of before you got your leadership master's
Yes,
in
sir.
getting your certification, right?
Yes, sir. Yes,
What
sir.
when you went into that program, what was one or two things like when you went in, you had already like, man, I learned this by learning to be a teacher in those 8 years
Mm-hmm.
or however many years before going into
Mm-hmm.
getting your master's. What was it? Was there anything specific that you took into that? And you was like, man, that's pretty cool that just life experience in the classroom already had taught me that.
Yeah.
If that's if anything stood out to you on that.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I'll say this real quick. Those of you that follow in education circles, many of you know the great George Couros, and was fortunate several years ago to have been a guest on his podcast. And one of the things that I share with people is that, and have over the years, is that I really didn't call out to leadership. Leadership called out to me. And those of you that are fans of 80s music, you may remember the band Flock of Seagulls, and they had the song called I Ran, or entitled I Ran, and I ran so far away. And so, about year two, it's about year two, year three, I go to my mailbox one day. And of course, this is a huge school. So, there are like 130 plus people on staff. So, there's just a sea of mailboxes. And I go to my mailbox and I pull this form out. And it was basically, in essence, it was an application to become a teacher, leader, and department chair. And I was like, oh, yeah, this is a mistake. So, yeah, I'm still in the newbie phase. So this is an absolute mistake. So I started looking around in other people's mailboxes and no one had it. Hmm. Okay. I started asking some friends and they were like, no, right. You're the only one that got that. So then I went and I asked our administrator that was over our department at the time. And I said, well, ma'am, um, this is a mistake. Somebody put this in my mailbox in error. I just want to give this to you because, I'm still in the newbie phase. I'm still trying to, kind of learn about things and stuff like that. And she looked at me. She's long since retired as well. And she looked at me and she said, no, Mr. Wright, that wasn't a mistake. I'm the person that put it in there. And I was like, oh, okay. And she said, I see leadership in you. And I said, okay, well, thank you, ma'am. I'm still trying to kind of learn things. So fast forward, um, and I say this again, there are people that come into your life for a reason and for a season. And so, again, leadership, I didn't call out to leadership, leadership called out to me. And so there are different people placed in my life that they just had this almost like they felt compelled to give me a nudge about getting into leadership. And so I said, well, you know what? Eventually, let me just kind of do this teacher leader thing. I'll help kind of mentor some other teachers, and we'll just kind of see how that is. So I came into contact with this thing that's talked a lot about in the business world, not so much in education circles, but a little bit more these days. And I would encourage everyone out there, if you have not done what I'm getting ready to share with you, again, once you're in a safe place, you're not driving or doing heavy machinery or something, once you're in a quiet place where you can really sit down, because you do need a quiet place to do this, to go ahead and take this assessment. And I got introduced in those days to Myers Briggs Type Indicator, or MBTI, and had never ever heard of it, didn't know anything about it. And so years later, of course, I got introduced to some other assessments like DISC, and Enneagram, and some other ones. But I will tell you that over the years, the one that I have used the most, and the one that I've talked to other leaders and other educators about the most, is MBTI. And that's phenomenal. So when I did go into um, graduate school again, American College of Education, A study to you, when I did go into graduate school and I began those studies, I did have that foundation of MBTI with me, and that has proved to be invaluable over the years. Because, and I'll say this here real quick, if you're going to be a better leader and a great leader and a good leader, even a decent leader of other people, you need to be a good leader of yourself, and you need to know who you are. And introspection is key, folks. So if you ever come across someone who tells you, yeah, I don't need to do any introspection, I don't need to look inside, just politely say thank you, turn around, and run away quickly.
That's good. Thank you for sharing that. That's really good. I want to make sure that I touch on some of these other things that I was thinking
Sure.
about when I was looking over your bio and things like that. Talk to me about Toastmasters. What's your biggest takeaway?
Yeah, love, 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 love that. Absolutely love that. So, a shout out to District 25, everybody that's out there doing that. I will tell you that my path with that organization was kind of really a unique one. Again, those that have followed me over the years, you know that I'm very, very grateful, immensely grateful and honored to have been on quite a few podcasts over time. You can go to therightleader.com and see some of those podcast appearances. But then also, too, at the same time, have been invited to speak at different conferences. So, immensely, immensely grateful for the opportunities that I've had to go ahead and share with people. So, I came into that space with that organization through the invitation of a friend. And so, what's kind of unique about that is, when people come into Toastmasters, I think the perception people have is that when people come into that organization, they're already very well accomplished speakers. Okay. And that happens sometimes. But the vast majority of people that come into affiliation with that organization, they're people that want to get better at speaking. They want to get better at leadership. Some of them, for them to stand up and even say hello to a crowd of people, a small crowd of people, like 5 or 6 people, is a huge deal. And so I kind of looked at the organization really from a different perspective, which I think is really the core basis and foundation of what it means in terms of servant leadership, which simply was, I'm not looking to see what they can go ahead and give me. What can I do to go ahead and help all of the members there be better? And so for me, I've just had a wonderful opportunity there as the vice president of public relations to really share about our club with other people, and to obviously mentor aspiring speakers there as well. And so there are a lot of things that I could say, but I will say this one thing. It's so hard to whittle it down to just one thing, but I will share this, right? We'll take it to two things. Number one, to be in a space where you can exercise your speaking skills, because getting up and speaking in front of people is very similar to when we go to the gym. So we're exercising our muscles physically when we go to the gym. When we stand up in front of people and we speak, we're exercising our speaking skills and our speaking muscles. So that is a huge thing. The second thing that is really a game changer, and it's been a game changer for me, and it's helped me to elevate even my speaking skills. And I'll say this, as a mentor told me many, many years ago, he said, no matter what level you're at, there's always another level. There's always an opportunity to become even better. And so, one of the things that I really enjoy is understanding that obviously you have to speak to different things, but you're timed. Every single time you get up to speak, you are timed. And we have red cards, yellow cards, and green cards to remind you while you're speaking of those time limits and those time benchmarks. So I love that. And it really helps you to go ahead and become very succinct and very powerful and to the point in terms of how you speak. And then, really simply it's this, um, we're welcoming and we want a sense of belonging and a sense of family. Very much so. Thank you for asking.
That's good. Yeah, yeah, I love that. Now, the other question that I said I gotta get this one in as well is how do you win a debate? You
Very good. So, one of the things you really did read the bio there, sir. You studied. So, one of the things that I've had the great honor of being involved in is being a debate judge for the Dallas River Debate Alliance, or as those locally are familiar with it, DUDA, DUDA. And what I really tell folks about is simply this, and I'm a debate judge for policy debate, is when you come in, of course, obviously you need to have your points that you're going to argue for, and then obviously be aware of those things that you're going to argue against, and then have your counters prepared, your rebuttals prepared. But what I often share with the debaters is this. Obviously, I want to know about the details, but here's what I also want to know about from a speaker standpoint, because debating is speaking. I want to know, have you made an emotional connection with your audience? Have they not only heard the data, heard the numbers, heard the statistics that you said that you believe are in favor of your cause and your side, whether it's for or against, but have you brought it home to them to say to them and to ask them, imagine if your life was impacted by this? What would your thoughts be? Imagine if your life caused you to have this, or your life had this thing happen, this occurrence. How would you feel about that? Because what I often say to them is this: numbers are great, information is great, but typically in our lives, I speak for my life, when I've made a major decision, great emotional connection has been involved. And so we always want to go ahead and not only share the data, but make the emotional connection and simply finish it all wrapped up with a bow of saying, this is why I believe that our point is the point that is the most impactful to humanity and society.
That's good. I like that. I've never taken a debate class, but I always find it interesting, especially the Great Debate. Is that the movie
Yes,
with? Yeah. After seeing that, I was like,
yes, the great
I want to be.
debaters.
But it's some skills to that. It's not. It's takes some talent. It's some skills. You got to learn how to do it. And so I've
Yes,
always
sir.
been uh, um, interested in it from that point. Hey, just because as we continue to get closer to wrapping up, there's a couple of more questions I definitely want to ask you.
Sure.
I know you're involved with mentoring. You've mentioned mentors in your life and how they've impacted
Yes,
you.
sir.
Tell me why you being a mentor is so important to you.
Yeah, simply it's this: each one mentor one. And I tell people that all the time. So when people come and they tell me, oh, I'm this kind of leader and I'm this kind of leader, I'm so great, I'm so awesome, Vernon. And I say, okay, no problem. Tell me about one person you're mentoring right now, because I'm going to say this and I'm going to share this with your audience. And again, if you're not able to safely take this down, when you're able to come back to this episode and listen to it again, you will definitely want to take this down. And it is simply this: in an age where everyone is calling themselves a servant leader, I'm going to say this to you: real leaders mentor other people. And they don't do it just to say they did it. They did it and they continue to do it because it's an expression of the heart. I was telling a friend earlier today that we can do all of the right things for all of the wrong reasons. Let me say that again and repeat that one more time because repetition is our friend. We can do all of the right things for all of the wrong reasons. But, folks, let me tell you something. When you know that what the people are saying is right and it's accurate, which is the data, we were talking about that with debaters, right? But then on top of that, you know that their spirit and their heart is coming from a right place, a place that wants to uplift and make better humanity. That seals the deal. And so for me, each one mentor one because that's my contribution to making society better.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, mentoring is something that I definitely value. Having a mentor and being a mentor are two
Yes,
things
sir.
that I've always tried to keep in my life. I always tell people you always need a mentor 20 years ahead of you, and so I've always tried to
Yes,
keep an
sir.
older person in my life that can speak that wisdom and just kind of help guide me through big decisions that I'm making and everything. And so that was really something that stood out to me about you is just that mentoring piece. And so I like that. Each one mentor one. I love it. Now, since because you're a mentor, because you're a leader, you're a teacher, you're an educator, this last question is one of my favorites typically that I get to ask because I feel like it means a lot to a person who invests in others. Can you tell me a story of one of your students that has been really special to you?
Yeah, and I told this story when I was speaking at TCEA. The second time I was speaking at TCEA, and we had a crowd of about 500 people, an audience of about 500 people. And, sometimes, and hopefully I'm going to be a little authentic here. Hopefully I don't break any rules while I do that. Um, but when you're in this business that we're in, sometimes you're working with people that come to really the environment, if you will, they come to the thought space, not only thinking about education and learning, but really thinking about what's going on in their personal lives. And that's one of the reasons why I like that saying, Maslow's before Bloom's, so very much. So I was working with a group of students, working with a young man. It's been many, many years ago. And I was certainly convinced that I was not at the top of his Christmas card list. But I knew that what I was doing was very impactful work. This young man did not have a father figure in his home, and this father figure the absence of that, had greatly affected this young man. And so my hats off to anyone that is out there trying to do what they can do to make young people better. Because this man was challenged. He was very much so challenged, and he was trying to find his way. And so one day he walks up to me and he says, "Mr. Wright," he said, he had a piece of paper in his hand. He said, "Mr. Wright, this is for you." And I said, "Oh, okay. Well, what is this?" And he said, "You have to make a promise." And I said, "Okay. Well, I usually don't do that, sir." Uh, but he was like, "You have to make a promise to not read this until the school day is over." And I said, "Okay, fine, right." And he said, "I'm leaving." And I said, "Well, you leaving for the day? You're not feeling well, or you're leaving to go on a field trip or something, or come back later?" And he said, "No, Mr. Wright." He said, "I'm leaving because my family is moving." And I said, "Oh, okay." And this young man at the time was about 14 years old. Okay, to kind of give people some context. And so those years are very formative years, are very important years. And he said, "But you have to make a promise that you won't read it until the school day is over." Okay, no problem. Put it in my pocket. I went on about my day. It's been several years ago. He's grown now. And went out to my car. And so I'm sitting there in my car, and I said, "Well, do I read this now?" And because I was convinced he was going to let me know fully how he felt about me in a not so endearing way. And I was like, "Well, so do I read this now and I have time to decompress on the way home, or Do I prepare myself on the way home and they get home, open it up and read it, and risk being upset that the whole evening? So I said, well, you know what? Let me just go ahead and get it out of the way. So open up the letter. I'm sitting there in the parking lot in my car, and he talks about and says, hey, Mr. Wright, I know that sometimes we had differences of opinions and so forth and so on. And I got to the very end of the letter. And however, how many of you know out there that are listening right now that sometimes when you get to the end of a letter or the end of something that someone has written, that really that's the most impactful thing, and that certainly was the case here with this letter. And he got to the very end of the letter and he said, "Thank you, Mr. Wright." He said simply this: "You were the dad I never had." And I will tell you, folks, I'm a pretty hardened person. I've been through some very difficult circumstances in life, but I will tell you, when I read that, I broke down.
Hmm.
I just totally broke down because I was so convinced that I really wasn't making progress with this person. But to receive this letter, it really brought it home and shared with me that, you know what, Vernon, you are. And that's why I shared at TCEA that we're farmers. We're always farming. Why so? Because we're always planting seeds, always. And sometimes the seeds that we don't think are growing are the ones that are growing very well. And so I want to encourage everyone that's listening to this, keep planting seeds, because if we don't plant seeds, we won't get a harvest.
Wow. Thanks, Vern. That's good. So good. Keep planting seeds. I'll say this about planting seeds. I'm a person of faith, and today's Sunday, and so people typically go to church on Sundays. And today, the message that we heard was about loving your neighbors. You're right,
Yes.
and what it was all about was how do you go and plant seeds? How do you help people and give to people?
Hmm.
And the cool thing about this was I came home today, and there was a flower on our porch with a handwritten note. And we opened the note, and it's from our neighbor thanking us for being great neighbors. Right? And she doesn't
Wow.
go to our church. She doesn't go. She doesn't know anything about this
Wow.
message that what's happening. But because we were planting seeds in her life, helping her
Yes,
get to her
sir.
doctor's appointment, checking on her animals, these
There you
same things
go.
that you're talking about.
Yes,
And one
sir.
of the reasons that I love teachers and educators like yourself is because you get the opportunity to do this to thousands, hundreds,
Yes,
sometimes it's
sir.
hundreds or thousands of individuals. And so, Vernon, thank you for that, and thank you for planting seeds in that young man's life. Because and sometimes I'm like, I don't need to make an impact on everybody, but if I
Hmm.
can make an impact on one,
Yes,
that
sir.
that is a win for me. So thank you, Vernon. Thank you for this amazing these pro tips. I love how you share the pro tips. Hopefully, people will come back and listen again and write those down if they were driving or running heavy machinery. Do not, yeah,
Right.
yeah. Before we get off here though, before we get off here, you have to because I was expecting to see the hat. And if the head is near you, I think you should at least put on the head as you tell people as we get ready to close out of here. Tell people about your service and what you do and how they can connect with you.
Yep. Well, what I will say is this is, of course, if you're on the socials, X, Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, what have you, simply the right leader. And that's spelled TheWRIGHT, leader, LEADER, just all together at sign the right leader across all the major socials. And of course, we referenced it earlier. If you'd like to see some of the podcasts that I've been on before in the past and see some of the other things that I'm involved in, very grateful to be involved in my life, go to therightleader.com. And at your request, sir, if I can go off camera briefly, we can go get the hat for you if you'd like to do this, sir.
Go right ahead. Go right
All
ahead,
right, let's
ladies.
do
And
it.
why he's going to get that, I'm just going to say, hey, go check him out on social media. He's all over social media, and so I'd love for you to go check him out and just connect with him and continue to encourage him in the work that he is doing, because it is needed work. Teachers need to be invested in and encouraged and mentored and all those things. And so it's been really cool to listen in on Vernon's story. And I have not said anything to him, but I have to mention also the bow tie, because he's rocking a bow tie, ladies and gentlemen. And so, people who are rocking bow ties, that's a whole nother level. And so I want to make sure that we acknowledge the bow tie. There we are. I love it. And the bow tie. I love the bow tie as well. I think you're on mute. Did you mute yourself?
I did indeed.
Yeah,
I'm off mute now. All right.
I love it. Hey, I told them while you stepped away, I said, also I have to mention the bow tie as well. I have a friend, his name is James. His name is James Bond, and he lives in Dallas as well. He's a coach. He's a life coach, and every time we get on the call, he's got the bow tie on. So
yes, sir.
So I love it. I love it. Yeah, I was looking at your Instagram profile pic. It's a cowboy. Do you have a cowboy hat on in all of your profile pics?
Quite a few, yes.
Yeah,
quite a few.
Yeah,
yes, sir.
Yeah.
It's interestingly enough, it's become part of my trademark.
Yeah, no, for sure. I'm looking at your social now. Like that hat is definitely on in most of the pictures. So I love it. You and Deion Sanders, y'all bringing it back. So
yes, sir.
Hey, thank you again, ladies and gentlemen, for hitting that play button for another episode of the Heady Coleman podcast. And make sure you connect with Vernon. And as always, ladies and gentlemen, go win.